Welcome to part 2 of really cool projects that Bill Gates and his mates are investing into nowadays. So if you missed part 1, I recommend that you watch it. Well, of course I do. I created it and I'm trying to get more views for myself and I've got a bit of a vested interest. But anyway, moving on to the current video, because I'm sure some of you watching this probably already seen that video and are getting a little bit annoyed about how I'm rambling on about it even though you've already watched it. And there's nothing more annoying than an overly pushy salesman that just doesn't shut up, right? So let's move on to number 6. Fervo Energy. So geothermal energy is quite often overlooked. So it turns out that below our feet, the Earth gets very hot. In fact, as you get closer and closer to the core of our own planet, the temperatures are actually in excess of what is actually burning at our sun. And no, you did not hear that incorrectly, and no, I'm not exaggerating. The core of the Earth is hotter than the sun. And so, yes, this sounds like a great energy source of just so much abundant constant heat. But the problem is, though, is that it's too far below our feet, except in some parts of the world. So in places like Iceland, it can be very easy to harness this energy because the heat has actually generated actual levels that are sort of just below the surface, or even to levels that are diggable. That's right, I make up words. But for the rest of the world, it is unfortunately kilometers upon kilometers underground, and it is very hard to access. And even if you could access it, the amount of pumps and the amount of infrastructure required to get things moving around, it's just, you won't get a return on investment, which is why it's not been widely adopted across the world. And so now, this is where we get into Fervo Energy. And so when I mentioned that the core of the Earth is hotter than the surface of the sun, we don't have to literally go all the way to the Earth's core. So what Fervo specifically are doing is that they're looking for underground water reservoirs. And for a lot of these underground water reservoirs, they're pressured in and there's no outlet for any of this water to go. And so it's getting exposed to the heat of the Earth's core, and it's wanting to steam up and it's wanting to boil out and put out a lot of pressurized steam and gas. But the problem is, though, is that there's no outlet for it, so basically it just sits there. So what Fervo Energy are trying to do is find these underground water reservoirs and then basically create a little bit of a pipe or an outlet for the steam to go. And then over time, this underground water supply will be boiled by the natural heat of the Earth's core. And now that there's an outlet, it'll shoot towards that outlet as the path of least resistance, and then they can put a turbine there and then generate the electricity that is created as that steam shoots past the turbine. And this isn't 100% reliant on finding underground water reservoirs as well. In some cases, they may just be able to find where they can dig and then basically just pump in grey water or old sewage water, basically pump it down there, let it steam up, and then let the steam turn to the turbine. And obviously this isn't going to be the game changer. It's not going to be the nuclear fusion or the thing that's going to save us and be the magic silver bullet that's going to solve all our problems. But this is 24/7, and it'll take many parts of the world off a reliance of fossil fuels. Now, part number 7 is Quantumscape. And this has been poised by some people as the potential killer of the lithium battery. And so, they're hoping to make solid-state batteries. And yes, I know every man and the dog are attempting to do this. So, to explain what solid-state batteries are, I first need to point out how current batteries work. So every battery in the world, whether it be lithium or your old car battery, ranging back from the 50s even to the latest ones that are made today, all of them contain a liquid inside of it. And these liquids do all the chemistry wizard stuff that makes batteries work by releasing electrons one way or the other. And the problem with using a liquid, though, is that it expands under heat. So in a situation where either 1, the battery is being heated up, or 2, the battery is being charged or discharged at too fast a rate, there is a potential that the liquids are going to get so pressurized and so built up that it'll cause an explosion with the battery. And furthermore to this, they're also vulnerable that if they were to face a sudden impact or a sudden jarring, there is a potential for an explosion. And so with this, it restricts how quickly batteries can be safely charged and discharged, and hence limiting the battery's capabilities. And because of this, many companies have been researching how to make a battery material that uses a solid rather than a liquid. It's basically all of the upsides of a current lithium battery, but none of the downsides. And just like with nuclear fusion, the technology seems to always be about 5 to 10 years away, and it always has been and it always will be. We're just always on the cusp of having a big breakthrough, but never quite breaking through that thing that you break through. So what makes Quantumscape so special then? Well, they actually have created a working prototype. And this isn't just them saying they have a working prototype. They've actually impressed VW, as in Volkswagen, the car company, enough for them to invest $200 million with them to help their company with their research, and also in return to be a preferred supplier for when they actually do have this energy breakthrough. Anyways, since VW have made this $200 million investment, 3 other car companies have made significant investments into this company. And out of these 4 companies, so Volkswagen and the other 3, they've invested anonymously. They don't want to reveal who they are. But it has been said though that all 3 of these companies, with Volkswagen, are all amongst the top 10 car manufacturers in the world. Number 8, Pivot Bio. So to explain what these guys do, I first need to explain the problem that they're trying to solve. In farming, they use a lot of fertilizer in order to get the benefits of the nitrogen that is in that fertilizer. And for the fertilizer that we have so far, the nitrogen is very clumpy and in patches. And so it'll be way too potent in some areas of farming crops, not potent enough in other parts of farming crops, and it'll be very unequal distribution. And you get very inconsistent results for current day farming techniques with the use of fertilizer. And there's a second problem with the current day fertilizer as well, and that is if we experience heavy rain. Because what will happen here is that these nitrogen clumps will then be washed away into an aquatic ecosystem where it is basically just not welcomed at all and is an extreme overdose. So not only have you lost all the benefit of this nitrogen for your farming crops, but it's now gone into an aquatic ecosystem where it's not welcomed at all. So it's basically a double negative effect. And then furthermore to this, if no crop is able to actually extract the nitrogen from this fertilizer in time, it'll eventually get to the point where it goes through this other chemical process and then be released into the atmosphere as a CO2 equivalent. And when I say CO2 equivalent, the gas that it actually gets released into is actually worse than CO2 as for the effects of global warming. And so this is a very big problem. So what Pivot Bio are basically trying to do is add in another chemical into the fertilizer to 1, spread out the nitrogen more equally amongst the fertilizer patch, and 2 is to enable it to release the benefits slowly. So that way there won't be overdosed parts of the crop and underdosed parts of the crop, it'll all be equally dosed. And furthermore to this, it'll be released slowly and consistently over time. And another benefit about this too is that if there is an event of serious rain, 1, it's more likely to cling to the soil that's already on and less likely to be washed away. And 2, for the bits that do make it into an aquatic ecosystem, because of its slow release, it is less likely to do significant damage to that said aquatic ecosystem. So Pivot Bio, if it's successful, it will be game changing for how our food is produced and where our food comes from. Number 9 is CarbonCure. So I bet you did not know that cement production actually rivals agriculture and transport as far as being an emitter of CO2 and CO2 equivalents. And the Breakthrough Energy venture has already invested in a few cement companies that are basically trying to address this exact problem. But the one I'll be talking about today is CarbonCure, who focus on concrete rather than the cement side of the equation. So what CarbonCure are hoping to do is that they get carbon from the air and then make it into a solid in the form of calcium carbonate, and then mix that into the concrete mix, so not directly into the cement, which other companies are doing. And this will then reduce the amount of cement that is needed in order to create that concrete. And another benefit of this too is that there's no degradation at all to the structural integrity of this concrete. So it's a bit of a double benefit, is that they're reducing the amount of CO2 that is already in the air by reusing it, and they're preventing the release of future CO2 from actually making this new concrete. And just to explain one of the benefits of this technology, if a high-rise building is made with CarbonCure rather than traditional cement with concrete, it will reduce the equivalent of what an 888-acre forest would do in a year. And so that is about 3.6 square kilometers if you aren't familiar with how acres work. Number 10, Max. And so Max is a Nigerian company which is hoping to be the Uber of Nigeria with an electric vehicle twist. So for anyone who is watching World Population Demographics, you may have noticed that India is now the new China. And in another 20 years, Nigeria will be the new India, or the new China. So currently Nigeria has a lot of poverty and they also have a lot of pollution, and Max are hoping to solve both of these problems simultaneously. Now, they have recruited 100,000 tricycle, motorcycle and car drivers to both ferry goods and people around the country. Now, furthermore, they've recently been really adopting electric vehicles into their fleet, and they also sell electric vehicles. So the program is basically to recruit a driver, give them an electric vehicle, it's usually a bike, and then have him run around as an Uber or a courier service, and then with that wage, they'll then pay back the bike. And then after some time, they would have paid off that vehicle, and then they'll be able to keep a larger percentage of the wage after that. So it is really a win-win arrangement for both Max and the Nigerian workers who they recruit to drive for them. But this is a very difficult and a massive undertaking. Now, it sounds pretty simple on the surface, but they have to work alongside unions, WorkSafe agencies, and health insurers in a country where much of the staff did not even exist in any form of a government database. So therefore, they're having to register these drivers and then help them exist in a sense according to the eyes of the Nigerian government, which in turn allows them to apply for loans and also pay for their children's educations. And this is all on the back of electric vehicles. And aside from how good this business model is, both for growing a business and also nation building in Nigeria, the vehicles are kind of cool too. Like, I mean, look at this electric bike right here. I wonder if they ship to Australia. So anyway, that is 10 projects that the Breakthrough Energy Ventures are investing into. Breakthrough Energy basically being Bill Gates and all his mates. It's actually pretty hopeful to see just how much money is being invested into by some of these billionaires into this green revolution. Anyway, please remember to like and subscribe if you like content like this. Not only do I cover cool things that are being invested into right now in the world of research and development, but also go over some really interesting moments in the world of monetary history.